Okay, welcome to this online platform. This is biology form 1. Okay, and under biology we'll look at the topic organisms and the life processes. So in this video, in short, you are going to identify the characteristics of living organisms. Okay, now when we talk about biology, we are simply talking about the scientific study of life and the living organisms. That is all about biology. So this scientific study of life, it investigates the structure, it investigates the function, the growth, the origin, or just the ovulation of living things or living organisms. So in a simpler way, we can say biology is simply the scientific study of living and non-living things, how they form, how they develop, and how they interact. So how living organisms and non-living organisms, how they form, how they develop, and how they interact. That is the biology. Now when you look at the topic that we have for today, it is about identifying the characteristics of living organisms. And when we talk about the characteristics of living organisms, we are simply talking about the features that these living organisms exhibit, features that these living organisms have. And it's because of these features that you are able easily to identify, okay, this is a living thing, this is a non-living thing. For example, as a girl child, you have the characteristics, you have some features that you portray, that you exhibit, that you have, and it's because of those features that you have that it is easy for someone to identify, someone to look at you and conclude, oh, this is a girl. And when you look at a boy child, these boys, they have the features that we call the characteristics that they exhibit, that they have, that they portray, and it's because of those characteristics that it is very easy for them to be identified as a boy child. Imagine you're a girl and you have no features of a girl, then people will look at you and they'll be like, no, this one is not a boy, this one is not a girl. Reason being, the features that you have are not identifying who you are, and those are characteristics. So these features, these characteristics that you are going to identify here are features that all living organisms have. The first feature that we have is feeding. We have a number of features here about the living organisms. So we have a number of features. So the first feature that we have, it's feeding. We have breathing, we have respiration, we have reproduction, we have growth, we have locomotion, we have sensitivity, as well as excretion. So in detail, this online class will help us understand all these characteristics that we have just identified here. We are going to explain one by one very well, very simplified, and where you have a question to ask, feel free to ask any question, then I will be able to attend to you. Okay, let's start digging in detail. We have feeding as one characteristic that is identified. What is feeding? If I ask you, have you eaten? You are going to say, yes, I have eaten. So that process is feeding. So the process by which you as an organism, you are able to obtain food, okay? And there is no way that you as an organism that you can survive without eating. The purpose of life is feeding, and we all feed as living organisms. So all living organisms, they feed. But how we feed is different. For example, how humans feed is different from how animals feed. Okay, so we feed as living organisms, but we do not feed in the same way. Okay, for example, under feeding, we have two main types of nutrition. Namely, we have what we call the autotrophic nutrition, which is right over here. Autotrophic nutrition. We also have another type of feeding which we call heterotrophic nutrition. What type of nutrition is autotrophic? So under autotrophic is where you find the autotrophs. They are making their own food. Okay, autotrophs, they are making their own food. Unlike humans, when a baby is born, babies, they don't make their own food. Okay, they depend, their feeding is dependent on the house of the parents. So parents will ensure that they feed their babies. Now when you talk about autotrophic nutrition, this is where now you find the autotrophs, they are making their own foods. And this type of nutrition it basically happens in plants. You know what a photosynthesis is. Okay, a process where plants, they make their own food. Okay, now we have another one which we call heterotrophs or heterotrophic nutrition. So under this type of nutrition, it is where now you find the heterotrophs, they are now taking food that is already available in their bodies. Okay, that is already available in their bodies. And some of the examples of the heterotrophs, we have also plants, they fall under this. We have the fungi, we also have the protozoa, they also fall under this category. Okay, so we've seen that feeding is one of the characteristics, and the nature of humans is to feed. Yes, we also feed. Okay, and we depend, as we are growing, we are still babies, we depend on foods that are already available. Okay, so our parents will make food, then they will feed us. Okay, that is the already available food. Okay, so we are done with the first type of nutrition, which is the first type of characteristics, or one of the characteristics of living organisms, which we just called the feeding. So now we are going to proceed to the next one and see another important characteristic of living organisms, and this characteristic is what we call the breathing or the respiration. Okay, so breathing or respiration, and the good part is that we all breathe. We all breathe, so it is not something that should cause us get worried. What is this type of it's something that we do in most cases. Okay, okay, so and before I just proceed, as for humans, maybe you can ask about the same characteristic, which is feeding. Where are humans falling? Is it under autotrophic or heterotrophic? Well, humans can't fall under heterotrophic because humans, we cannot produce our own food through photosynthesis like what plants do. Okay, but what humans do, we consume other organisms, and these organisms, that's where you find people eating fruits, we find people feeding on animals. So in short, humans, we consume other organisms, plants and animals, for us to obtain what? The energy and the nutrients necessary for our survival. That's why we eat nshima. When you look at nshima, where is nshima coming from? It is coming from plants. And where are those plants coming from? So plants are coming from the process called the photosynthesis. This process, photosynthesis. So photosynthesis will make, it's a process where plants just simply make their own food. Then as humans, we will consume plants or food that are coming from what? From these plants. Okay, then you see people eating chicken. I love chicken. I love beef. I love sausage. Where is that meal coming from? Well, it is coming from animals. These are animals that we humans consume. So we depend on plants, we depend on organism, animals for our survival. Okay, let's look at the next one, which is breathing and respiration. Right now, we are alive because of one thing, and this thing is what we call the breathing. So it's the taking in of air rich in oxygen and releasing air rich in carbon dioxide. So this oxygen is used to release energy from food, and carbon dioxide is produced as a waste product, and the whole of this process is what we call respiration. So the whole of this process is what we call what? Respiration. Now, in simpler terms here, what happens is this: you as a human being, you breathe in oxygen. Now, when you breathe in oxygen, oxygen will go into your body. Now, when oxygen goes into your body, it is going to be a contaminated oxygen. So when it is a contaminated oxygen, you are going to breathe out that air that you took in. Now, as you breathe out that air, it is no longer oxygen because it is carrying some impurities, and at that point it becomes the carbon dioxide. Now, where do we humans get oxygen? Well, we get oxygen from plants. The opposite is that humans survive through oxygen, and plants, they survive using carbon dioxide. So when you breathe out carbon dioxide, then plants, they feel nice. That's why if you feel very hot, you sit under the tree. You see the tree is even welcoming you. Wow, you are welcoming the tree. This tree has a very nice shade, and that same tree is appreciating your presence to go there. You'll be like, wow, this guy has done me a favor. It's because as you breathe out carbon dioxide, the plant is breathing in that carbon dioxide for it to survive. And as the plant is breathing out oxygen, you are also benefiting from that oxygen for you to survive. So plants, they use carbon dioxide for them to survive, and humans, they use oxygen for them to survive. So the process of you taking in oxygen and releasing out carbon dioxide is what we call breathing, and this process, it falls under the process of respiration. Okay, it falls under the process of what? Respiration. Very interesting topic in biology. Okay, very interesting topic in biology. So in biology, respiration is just the biological process of converting the nutrients into energy within the what? Within the cells. It is as simple as that. Okay, let's look at another characteristic, which is reproducing. We are here, if you are following closely, we are here on reproducing. What is involved under reproduction? Well, as you are growing, you will at some point decide to get married. Okay, so all living organisms produce young ones. Now, these organisms that produce young ones are organisms that are qualified to produce young ones. Not just you are still growing, your hormones are still growing, then you rush into producing young ones. It does not happen like that. It is a process that is specifically meant for adults, big people, and not young people. Okay, so what happens is that for these old people, not young people, for these old people to reproduce their offsprings, there must be a process called reproduction. So this process, it happens through two different things. It happens through sexual activities or asexual activity. So there are basically two types of reproduction. So there is one that involves the sexual, and the other one, it is asexual. Now what I mean when I say one type of reproduction is sexual is that you have a male and a female as adult. They meet. Now when they meet, they now have the chance to reproduce their young ones. Okay, so it is a long process that happens between a male and a female. As old people, they have the sex cells. Okay, as young one, if you're still young, you don't have the sex cells, so you stay away from this. Okay, so now the male and female sex cells, what they will do, they will fuse to form a zygote. Now as they fuse to form a zygote, this zygote will start to grow, start to develop into what we call an organism. Now when it is an organism, now people, you have a baby, they grow up, they become adults, just like that. Now for asexual reproduction, the parent organism, it will just divide itself to form two or more new offsprings without what? Without sex cells. An example that you can talk about asexual reproduction is the reproduction that happens between flowers. Okay, so flowers, they don't need a husband or a wife. So maybe it could be a bee, you know the bees, those insects that bite. So it could be a bee, it steps on the pollen grains, then it also steps on another plant, then the flower comes out. That is another type of what? Reproduction. Another type of asexual reproduction that we can talk about is the reproduction, for example, if you've seen the bananas, the growth of the bananas. All those are examples of asexual reproduction. So in an exam, if they ask you to give two examples of sexual reproduction, number one, you have humans. Number two, you have animals. These, they undergo the process called the sexual reproduction. Then for asexual reproduction, we have plants. So plants are examples of asexual reproduction. We go to the growth. Growth is another characteristic of characteristics of the living what? Organisms. Today you are 16 years. Next year you are not going to be 17 years. You are going to be 17 years. After 10 years you become an adult. After 10 years again you grow old. You become an old person. Okay, you become the old man or an old woman. So what does it mean? Growth as the characteristic of living organisms simply means that all living organisms, they grow. What does it mean? There is a change in both the size, the height. There must be a change. Okay, if I take you back when you were 6 years, you are just a baby, but you are not a baby anymore. Why? Because of the same called growth. Okay, so this causes the body of an organism to increase in size, and as the body increases in size, the body becomes more complex. Okay, so we have the unicellular organisms where you have growth which mainly involve an increase in cell size, while multicellular organisms, the growth is caused by an increase in the number of what? Cells through what we call the cell division. Okay, if I take you back to the characteristics, we have just mentioned 3 of them. So that means we are done with feeding, we are done with breathing and respiration, we are also done with reproduction, we are also done with the growth. So we are remaining with 1, 2, 3. So we are going to end here. I'm going to make a line here. So we are done with this. So we are remaining with the 3 characteristics of living organisms that you discuss in the next video. So go through this, and where you need help, let me know. Ensure that you copy these notes, write them, then any characteristic here that you are not going to understand, let me know so that I help. For now, we end here. This is our class for today. Thank you so much for watching.